Was it hard to write in a young female voice for the times that you needed to do that? I mean, it's through her diary that we hear some of her words.
Not necessarily. I'm actually good at that, of kind of hearing and feeling. And I once heard, because I have Tourette syndrome, as we've talked about before,
Right.
And I don't know if it comes from that, but I don't know if you knew this, but most of the good mimickers, like Richard Little and the people who the impersonators, all have Tourette syndrome. We kind of, and I watch my son who has Tourette syndrome. He watches things on TV and he absorbs them, and he can repeat them exactly. And I do that, and so I can like read a book and I can start writing in the style of the author. And so in this case, as I get into these characters, I just hear the girl and I start writing like the girl would think and talk. And
I know you've talked before about how you kind of have to fall in love with your own female characters. Talk a little bit about Grace and what her strengths are and what you love about her.
Never fell in love with Grace.
You never fell in love with her?
No, probably because the age difference.
Well, I don't mean it in that way.
No, but
Yeah.
actually I have. I felt
Yeah.
like The Last Promise. I did fall in love with the character.
Right.
I thought, yeah, this would be dangerous if this woman showed up in my life. Grace is an interesting character, and my daughter, who is an editor, and she's 22. She read. She goes, "Wow, who is Grace?" She said, "That's one of your most compelling, powerful characters you've ever written." She's just this very strong young woman who she can't afford to be vulnerable, but she desperately wants to be, which makes her a little bit complex. And so, I don't know, I like the combination.
She's very strong to run away, to live without food for some time, and to know what she needed to do. I won't divulge the ending. It's not. But we can say it's a wistful ending. It's not necessarily a happy ending.
You know what's interesting about the ending is when I tell people, I promise them that you'll cry. I mean, you will. That's everyone we tested, men and women, cry at the ending. And some people absolutely love the ending. I've had more people tell me this is my best book, and a lot of people I have a lot of respect for. They'll say this is your best book. I've had a few people come back and say, how could you? Get back to what you used to write. And I said, what's interesting about that is that it's like, no, this isn't necessarily more moving than like my last book. A little boy died in my last book.
Right.
How can you be more moving than that? I think it hits us in a different way, because in this case, you feel the same kind of obligation that Eric does about the girl. That's like, what should we do? And that I think there's almost a little sense of guilt in that we pick up as we go through the book.
He's not able to protect her as much as he would like. Is this book, in your mind, about healing, like many of your other books are? Does it have a healing component?
I think it's, if you've ever read Milton's Paradise Lost, I think the amazing thing about that is that Milton is really trying to show that God makes good things out of bad. And that is something I've come to understand through my life. And through the bad things that happen in this, there's in some ways a very joyful ending, a very powerful ending that you're like, wow, because of this, many, many people were affected. Many people were helped, and that's a good thing. So I think it's a very hopeful ending, and I think it's a healing ending. But what I wanted to happen is happening, and that is people are saying, you've opened my eyes. I didn't necessarily want to know that, but I'm glad I do.
As I was reading it, I was thinking about Elizabeth Smart, who's also from Utah, where you are. Now, she wasn't, she didn't end up pregnant, but she certainly was taken away and abused. And through that, she seems to have just developed into this, or she already was a strong individual, but she has inspired many other people in that strength and grace, really.
I've never met Elizabeth. I've met her father. In fact, I've had her parents over at our house, and I'd like to meet her. But she actually has done a pretty good job of trying to stay low, and just live a normal life, which is pretty outstanding.
This book deals with, as we mentioned, child abuse by somebody in the family, and there's been controversial legislation in the past about, if a girl becomes pregnant this way, and she wants to have an abortion, she has to get parental permission in a lot of states, and I believe that's true in Idaho, although it's been going through the courts. What's your sense on that? I mean, people say it's very frightening to the girls to have to then get permission from the very person who abused them. On the other hand, there's adoption available and things too. What do you think?
Well, I think that it's ridiculous to think that she would go and talk to the person who get permission from the person who abused her, the person if that's the case. I mean, I'm pro-life, and so I'm not. But on the other hand, the girl was raped, and so I think that it's something that she has to deal with her God and make the decision. And the idea of the father, that would be ridiculous. I mean, the guy should be in prison. So I mean that. So I don't really have an answer for you.
Yeah, no.
And in the space and time, I mean, what makes it difficult, really difficult for me is I spent the last decade protecting little children and babies, and so I have real trouble with ever saying abortion's okay.
Right.
And yet, on the other hand, I see this dilemma, and it's horrific, because that little girl, I would say, well, she doesn't deserve that, and that baby doesn't deserve that.
Well, certainly shows the need for safe shelter for girls that are in this situation. Your books often draw on spirituality, on theology. Were there any particular passages from the Bible that you drew on for this book? And you have a reference to Luke
in the very beginning, yeah, and that's the one that, it's better than a millstone, which is a big, massive stone, is hung around the neck. I think after working with thousands of abused children, I have that sense of anger over what some people will do, and that, whatever reason or whatever motivates them, there's a time when you have to say, you know what, I'll take my life before I will hurt another individual. That would be the honorable thing to do, and that the lack of that sense of honor, that is just so disturbing to me. So,
how is the Christmas Box organization doing, in terms of working with kids who age out of the foster care system and some of the other projects you have?
Well, this is a really important project, and the state of Idaho has been wonderful to work with. You're one of our pioneer states. What we've done in the past, of course, is we built shelters for abused, neglected children. We've since housed and served more than 20,000 abused children. We are changing our emphasis, just because politically it's not right to go out and build shelters. It's a very political.
Because people don't want them in their neighborhood, or?
No, it's actually not that. It's actually there's people who find ways to make money by suing the state, by saying, they're suing congregate care. When we started, people were suing states because they didn't have congregate care. There's a lot of people exploiting the system and making money off of it at the sake of our children. In our case, we have found this a terrific need, and that is we help kids coming into the system. The big problem is kids going out of the system.
Aging out.
Yeah, more than 60% of those youth within a year of leaving the system will either be incarcerated, homeless, or dead. Those are not acceptable numbers. Those are ridiculous numbers. And so we've launched with Grace a national initiative, but we've actually started 4 years ago putting Life Start kits in the hands of these youth as they leave the system, and hopefully then building a relationship. And it's been working.
Life Start kits.
Life Start kits are these big boxes that have everything the kids need, but we call them Trojan horses because what happens is once you get in their homes and their lives, they trust you. And so
you're working with the social workers as well.
Yeah, the social workers hand them out, and then we have some kind of relationship with, hopefully with the youth. Eventually what we want to do is have a mentor with every one of those kits. So we started in Utah, we moved up into Idaho, we're in Las Vegas and Wyoming now. We're ready to move to Arizona and Ohio, and the goal is to hit the whole country.
And on your website, which we will link to, and in the book, there's information on how people can get involved
Yes, absolutely.
if they're interested.